And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the Jeff Mara Podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Robin Lansong, who's had multiple near-death experiences and was called back to life by the medicine song of a rural Zimbabwean woman. Robin, welcome back. It's great to have you again.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I've always enjoyed our conversations.
Before we get started, I was thinking about the origin of your last name. Where does Lansong come from?
Thanks for asking. So when I was in the crisis stage of my trauma recovery, I was actually living in a women's shelter. I was 21, and I was starting my life over, and just like I said, entirely focused about my trauma resolution. And in that women's shelter, I just said, "What's my new name?" Because it didn't feel appropriate to carry my family name anymore. And so every night I just asked, "What's my name?" And so I would write things down, and they didn't really feel quite right. And so I think it was the third night that I asked that question, "What's my name?" And I dropped into a vision, and I saw this council of elders in this vision, and they were discussing something, and I realized they were discussing me. And then once they'd come to their conclusion, one of them turned to me in this vision and said, "Your name is Lansong." And for those of you who have had mystical experiences or visions, you can feel that difference when it's kind of your own creation or your own mind's generation versus something that's a true vision and a true mystical experience. And so just the instructions came right through me. So again, I was starting my life over. So I went and legally changed my name, and it really took me 15 years to truly understand what it means. And so I began singing. As the further I got the trauma out of my body, the more I could have the creativity of the singing and my visionary art become present. And so I was actually in a Native American ceremony, and one of the elders was walking around the circle, and he said, "Sometimes it can take you 15 years to understand a vision." And in that moment, again, it seems obvious, but Lansong, that my assignment is to sing the songs that are already in the land. And so that's what I do. And in that moment, I was like, oh, and I'd already been singing. And in that ceremony, they asked me to sing to the whole community of 150 dancers. So that's my assignment. So wherever I go, the land has a song in it. And so it's my job to get still, to get quiet, to listen in, and do my best to reflect that song back. And the same is true for people. We're each born with a song innately inside of ourselves. And so I do my best to reflect that back, to listen in and ask, what's medicine for this person right now, right here today, and how can I have what I call the great heart sing through me and remind them of their song.
Before we get into your singing, I would like to talk about a couple of your NDEs. And even though we did your main one previously, I've gained thousands of subscribers who may not be aware of your experience. Is there any way you can give us a short version of it?
Yeah. So I'll just give kind of like what you just said, a brief context for how the NDEs happened. So 1977, I was 8 years old. I'm American, so I was living on the East Coast. And so I was not protected as a child. My parents lacked that natural instinct to protect their young. And so I was spotted by somebody who was looking to abduct a child, and he just watched that I walked home from school. And at the end of the school year in second grade, he came and got me at the end of the school day. And I knew my life was in danger right away. And it's an odd thing to say that it's actually fortunate that I was already being abused, because then my intuition on how to read dangerous adults was already wide open. So I knew he was a whole different level of dangerous than I had encountered. And I knew my life was completely at risk with him. And so he drugged me. I'm not sure exactly how he took me out of the country, but a plane ride, because I was drugged. And when I became conscious again, I was actually in what's Rhodesia, 1977, which is now Zimbabwe, and he was a military personnel. And so the Rhodesian government was recruiting men from around the world to come help them fight in the war because they didn't have enough people. And so, in his distorted thinking, he took me with him. Once his training, 5-day training was done, he got rid of me. He gave me to another man who dropped me off out in the wilds by myself. I was picked up by soldiers. I now know from my research and my return trip, it was some of the most dangerous soldiers. And what happened is one argued to kill me and the other argued to protect me. So obviously the one that wanted to protect me won the argument. He took me out of that dangerous place and he dropped me off at a village I'm guessing he thought would be sympathetic to a white child. So again, the Rhodesian War was it was a civil war, and it was really about land and, of course, power. And so these people took the risk to take me in, which put them at risk. And so they fed me, they sang to me, and I thought, this is my new life. I forgot that I was white because I was surrounded by native Zimbabweans, and they all spoke Venda, so I just had to kind of figure out things as best as I could. And 2 of the women really took me in and mothered me. And so that was my first true experience of mothering. And so I'll go ahead and start singing to you here because that's what my mama did for me. And she took me in her arms and she sang to me. And my singing is different than her singing, but she is the one who opened up my ability to listen for the song inside people. So before this, I was really meditating on your audience and your people. So I'm going to choose a song for the people who are listening today.
Before you do so, I want to ask one thing real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to be singing in Vendem, that language?
Venda? No, I'm singing in the song that I hear in the land here in North America. So I live in California. I lived in Washington. So I'm listening to the song that's the origination here. Some people does say it sounds Native American. My heritage is more Irish and French. But I'm listening to what's here. I'm listening to the song in you, Jeff, and I'm listening to the song in your audience.
Would you say that you're channeling this song in real time?
Yes.
Oh, that's cool.
Mm-hmm. And my prayer is that this serves everyone's confidence to do their gift, to soften in the ways they need to open up so they can hear their connection to divine source, to show up in their meaningful ways, to show up in their kindness and their potency and their power. Because that's really why I share my story, because I want everyone to feel permission to be their gift, to be their strengths, to be their boldness, so that their life feels more rich and it spreads out, kind of like my art behind me, in these ripples to have goodness land where it's needed. Because as we know, there's so much suffering, there's so much difficulty, there's so much division. So if I can add a drop to connection, to aliveness, then that just really lights me up.
Robin, when you're singing, do you feel like you become the music?
Yes, perfectly said. And as I was dropping in, I was just really remembering that moment when my mama sang to me. And then there was a particular moment towards the end where I was connecting to someone who's going to watch this video and saying, let this help your organ health. Let this help your heart health. Let this help your breath, your enjoyment of being alive in this physical body today.
It must have been amazing having these women sing to you, because even when you sing now, for me, it feels amazing.
I'm so glad. Yeah. And the thing that I'm so obviously, and we'll get more into like what happened after I was taken in by these women. But the thing is about having multiple near-death experiences and having done so much of my trauma resolution work is that it's now easy for me to sing. It's easy for me to do the visionary art. It's easy for me to do intuitive readings to help people come home to their meaning and to their purpose. So sometimes I just cry with gratitude about how lucky I feel to be given all these gifts. And one of the things I learned from the people who took me in at that village is if you have been given a gift, the best way to take care of it is to share it, and share it as often as possible and as big as possible.
Okay, well, let's move forward in the story. I'm not sure how to get us back into the story. I'll let you take us.
I'll just dive right back in. So I was taken in by these people. The one particular woman mothered me. Another woman was also very loving to me, and they both sang to me to help me heal. There was a man who was also very good to me and really role modeled for me what masculine, powerful, and gentle combination can look like. So I hadn't had a lot of great role models from men. So that really shifted my worldview and what I thought people were about. So they really taught me about being a human being. So the women took me to the river. I had been assaulted by the abductor, so I had huge bruise. My ribs were broken. So they took me to the river and they covered me with clay to help heal that bruise. And again sang to me, so powerful, to get the hatred from his assault off my body. And then they called me to sing. And when I could sing back to them, they nodded that they considered me well. I was going to be okay because I could sing again. So again, I didn't understand the context of the Civil War at that time. The soldiers came to the village and threatened the village. So there's three sides. It's very complex. But if people didn't agree with kind of the more extreme soldiers, sometimes they were attacked, even though they were civilians and not directly involved. So they came and threatened the villagers. A couple days later, that's when I was shot. I wandered a little bit back to that creek, a little bit far from the village. A battle was starting. One of the soldiers spotted me and immediately pulled up his rifle. He was so close, I could see his finger on the trigger, and he shot me. And the bullet grazed the top of my head, blew me off my feet, and I began to die of blood loss. And so that whole near-death experience is in that first interview we did last September, a year ago. So I'm going to move past that one. So the key in how I was brought back to life, no medical intervention. This is rural Zimbabwe during the war, so there aren't even vehicles. So what happened is that my mama found my body, stopped the blood flow, and I was rising up, watching her from above. And at first she was wailing into the sky, just her grief just coming up. And I wanted someone to comfort her. But then I kept going to the other side through the veils, and she changed her song to singing, changed her wailing to singing. And then I could feel that she had called on the ancestors of the land to strengthen her song. And then it really came through all the veils. And when that song touched me, I remembered I hadn't done my purpose, which was to sing to others like she was singing to me, to call back people's vitality, call them home to themselves. So when I realized that, I turned around. I was about to merge with the Great Heart, but I came back to my body. And so again, they sang to get the hatred from the bullet off my head so I wouldn't go through life bitter. I was, barely alive. Again, no medical intervention, but just the herbs that they put on me and the caring for me. And really the love saved my life. So 2 days later, tragically, the soldiers came back and they attacked the village. And it was a massacre. And so the other mother got me on her hip and we were running. And she was then shot from behind. We went down and that got the, again, it was just about 2 days, so that got the blood flowing again in my head. And she yelled at me to keep running. And she had never yelled at me before. So my hardest thing to recover from is the survivor guilt. And so I followed her instructions to run because I was just 8. I couldn't pull her with me. And I was just so weak myself. So I made it about another 25 feet. I've been able to go back and retrace my steps. So I know I was running on sand and I fell forward again because I was bleeding. And I had a second death experience. And so I want to go more into that because I didn't do as much of that in the first interview. So I crossed over again, and this one was very different. When I became aware again, I was on another realm, and it was all white, and I could see a horizon line. And there was a being singing to me, and the song was, "You will live, you will live." And so that's like the children's nursery song that goes with the Three Blind Mice. And so I thought, I had a brain injury. My brain was swollen from having been shot 2 days before. I was very disoriented. And so I just thought it was instructions like, oh, I'm supposed to memorize this nursery rhyme like I had to do in school. And so I kind of started singing along. And then I thought, who's singing to me? And that curiosity, he brought me closer to him. And so there was still a white veil, but I could see through the white veil, and there was a man, and his presence was so potent that I was intimidated, but I knew he had such good intent for me. And so he eliminated the veil, and I could see him, and his skin was a blue gold, and he had a black bun on the top of his head, and there was jewels and items and things and sacred things all around him. But I didn't focus on those because his presence was so intense. And he started to show me that that creation comes from destruction. And so he showed me in my own mind 2 land masses coming together, crushing together to make a mountain. And then he showed me even the mountain gets destroyed, grain, by landslides. And so I'm watching all this thinking, I love the creation part, but I don't like the destruction part. And he said to me, that's because you're human and you can only see one tiny bit of time. But I am kind of God of creation, becomes destruction and creation are the same thing. And so he was showing me what you just lived through, this massacre, was overwhelming, intense destruction. But somehow it is going to become creation. And you are part of that creation. So I'm going to return you back to life so you can metabolize this destruction, make meaning of this destruction, and somehow contribute to a creation out of it. So he returned me back to my body. Again, I'm face down in the sand. Everybody I loved was behind me massacred. And I see this plant next to me. And You really can't even describe how overwhelmed and destroyed I am. And I see this plant is still upright. And I think, how can anything still be living after what just happened? And I hear his voice. I'm back in this realm, but I still hear him inside me commanding, crawl forward now, in this huge booming voice. And so I try to pull myself forward, and like my arm is numb. I've been on it for I'm not sure how long, but the blood flow has stopped again. And so he just keeps commanding me, and he keeps giving me strength. And I don't want to live. I want to go ahead and cross over again with everybody I just lost. And I'm crawling forward. I look over and I see another child that's been killed. And I really don't want to keep living. But he commands me, you will live. And again, I can feel I am a drop in the ocean of his power, of his vision for me and what I'm going to grow up and do. I can't see that at the time. I'm 8. I'm devastated. So I keep following his commands, following his strength, and he shows me the vision that I'm going to a well and somebody will find me tomorrow at that well. So I crawl forward for hours, and then at night I bury myself with sand because it's cold, and in the morning I unbury myself. And during the night I had a dream that was about everybody I loved crossing over, and I wanted to go with them. Like I say, I just wanted to be done. But they went on without me, and I had to remain here. And I've been able to draw some of that dream and share those images in some of my, we just created a book trailer video. So again, I'm hoping those videos and that artwork can serve people through their devastation. So in the morning, a woman named Mia Lucy came and found my body. I was half dead. She could have just left me there, because again, for her to take in a white child was a risk to her. But instead, she washed the blood off my face. She put me on her back as if I was her own child, and she took me back to her homestead. When neighbors saw that she had a wounded white child, they said, "Don't bother with her. It's too much of a risk." And I now know, because I've been back twice, she told them, "She's a living human being. I won't throw her away." And so that is why I am alive, is because of her courage to take me in. And she hid me. They actually put black shoe polish on my face so that I didn't stand out. That was a strategy of some of the white soldiers, is that they would blacken themselves so that they weren't spotted as easily. So they had that material to do the same for my skin. So I met her granddaughter, who I ended up reuniting with 40 years later. And so they also had the medicine singers come and sing to me again, because I was blind in one eye. I was really not doing well with the brain injury. But they cared for me. And again, they taught me what it is to be a human being. They taught me that belonging is created and equality is created by giving experiences of belonging, by taking people in when you don't have to. So they started asking around. We found this white child. We don't know who she belongs to. They didn't know I was American. They assumed I was a Rhodesian child and that my family had probably been killed. So they asked the nearest white family, who was actually across the border in South Africa. And they said, "We don't know what to do with her." And they said, "We'll take her. We'll find her family." So they took me. They figured out that I wasn't from there because I didn't speak Afrikaans. And they cared for me, that it was quite different because I was used to being sung to. I was used to being slept next to and cared for and touched. And it was a different culture. And also they were traumatized by the war, even though it was in South Africa. So it was much more, even though I had more food and we had indoor plumbing again. I really started to die from lack of touch, lack of being held. And so I went to the only place I could find that felt warm, which was behind the refrigerator. Because again, that time in 1977, those were run by a little pilot light, so it was warm there. And I started to die again of just loneliness. And also my head wound had become infected. So I started rising up, and this was much more simple. I just was rising up above the farm. I could see everything. And then they found me, and they took me to a hospital in Polokwane, South Africa. And I was hospitalized, given penicillin. From there, of course, they figured out from my American accent that I didn't belong there. And they really interrogated me. They said, "You don't want to go to an orphanage here, little girl. That would be a bad thing." So I went ahead and told them who my parents were. There was an agent that came and got me. They assisted me back on the flight back to the US. I was reunited with my family, which is very mixed because they were not protective and had mental illness themselves and were quite abusive. And so when I was back, I was so bereft. And of course, still recovering from brain injury. And I tried to talk about it, and my mother hit me and said, "Don't ever speak about that again." So as many people know who grow up in generational abuse, generational confusion about how to care for one another, is that secrecy is a higher priority than kindness and compassion. And that when people don't have the capacity to sit with difficulty, they pretend it never happened. And so that's what happened in my family. They never asked me what happened. And so my parents, I left home when I was, as soon as I possibly could at 19 and didn't go back. And so my parents never asked me. They never discussed it. My siblings are not interested. And so I really go where there's open-hearted people who are interested and curious, because growth, our transformation, as you know, is really about curiosity. You know, all these different things that, can we learn something new? And something that trauma does is it shuts down our hippocampus. And the hippocampus, we have two of them in our brain, and they're how we learn new things. And trauma can actually shrink the size and the openness of the hippocampus. So when people haven't done their trauma work, they often have difficulty learning something new or being curious to go outside of their current perspective.
Was the being that spoke to you and helped you Shiva?
Yes, in the book, is it okay if I show you the book cover?
Sure.
Yeah, so I just finished my book. My book just came out, Loving Bravely. And so in the book, I write everything from child perspective, and I keep that voice. So in the book, I call him God of mountains become beaches, because that was my experience of him. He destroyed the mountains to make the beaches. And so I really took me many years in my adult life to make sense of my death experience. But yes, when I researched it, I think it was somebody suggested to me, well, creation and destruction is Shiva. And his skin was blue, black bun on the top of his head. And when I started researching it, I was like, this makes sense. And again, as an 8-year-old white American, I wasn't exposed to anything Hindu. So I had no preconceived idea of this whatsoever. In my first death experience, we talked about I wasn't raised Christian, and I saw what I call my royal shepherd, that some people might consider Jesus. So, I think Ravi Shankar, he is Hindu, and he saw, I can't remember the name of who we saw, but it was a Christian, more Christian-oriented being. So a lot of times people are influenced by their training or their cultural context, but this was entirely, I'm white American, face down in the dirt, dying in Zimbabwe, and I see Jesus and Shiva. So I just like to share that too, that, is that more based on past life experience for me? A lot of my past life readings are more about that I was very much more tribal, and and knew much more about tribal experiences of belonging and how people organize themselves to connect and care for one another. So I think that when I was in that more village tribal setting, it was very normal to me, probably more normal to me than my American lifetime based on my past lives.
Do you think people can have a near death like experience without the trauma?
I highly recommend that more than getting shot. Yes. Yeah, Trisha Barker did a really great conference about this, and that was the theme of how can people who have had a spiritually transformative experience, an out of body experience, or like you said, a near death like experience, and get that deeper transformation without being crushed or broken or killed. And so I meditate every day, and I've been doing that for 20 years. And I highly recommend meditation and embodiment practices because the more you can, I know that there's certain spiritual practices that are about kind of leaving your body and ascending and just being crown chakra and just intuition. And I understand that, but that can be, for people who have had trauma, that can actually be avoidance of coming into your body. And so the first time someone said that to me, that it could be about avoidance or lack of embodiment, I was kind of offended. And I was like, I can ground myself. And so I came in through my crown, I came in through my third eye, my throat got a bit difficult. When I got to my heart chakra, all this emotion, all the repressed trauma started coming up. So staying with that process of embodiment, coming down into your organs, down into your belly, down to your sacrum, down to your root, down to your pelvis, that is a path of enlightenment. And it's not an easy path, but it's a very true, authentic path. So, and just honoring too that people have had experiences where they've risen up and they've been looking back on themselves. And that can be a moment of perspective. I do recommend dying meditations, breath meditations, and those can be very potent, especially breath practices, to get into altered brain state so that you have a new perspective, so that you can see yourself from a different view. And one of the things I love about mindfulness practices is that observing your thoughts, not believing your thoughts. Because when we're believing every thought we have, we have thousands per day, then we just kind of keep recycling our upbringing, recycling societal norms that might not actually be full of wisdom. And so when we can observe our thoughts, and I'll be honest, like when it becomes winter, I'm a little bit more prone to a depressed brain state. And so when I'm in that, I do my best to know these thoughts are being generated by chemicals in my brain that are in depression brain state. And so I try not to believe them. I might go there about like, oh, is all my work worth it? Is this changing anyone's life? Or, whatever, is all the drawings worthwhile? So that's just biochemistry generating a depressed thought. And so I do my best to back up from that. I do exercise. I hang out with friends. I sing to myself. I do my meditation. I do physical movement to get that brain chemistry to change. And I try not to believe those thoughts are more than just biochemistry that's, in the dark of winter. So yes, mine your spiritual transformative experiences. Mine your mystical experiences. Try to find people who you feel safe sharing the details. It can be dreams, because when we get it across to another, we can validate it for ourselves. So again, that's a lot of the people that come to me for working with me. It's because they need validation. And they might say, oh, you might think this is weird. And then they tell me their mystical experience. And you have to go pretty far to weird me out because my spectrum is pretty broad. So finding community, finding even one safe person you can share your experience with so you can unpack it more. Because when we just keep it to ourselves, we don't get to make meaning of what are all the details. And that's why writing this book for 16 years and really unpacking my near-death experiences, I've had so many people. I had about 45 beta readers, 9 editors, and they just lovingly asked me more. Did you get fed when you were there? Did someone bathe you? Like, how did you feel when you were with all these different beings in your death experience? Because my first drafts, I just said they loved me and they opened me up. And somebody said, well, tell me more. How were they each uniquely different? What was different about their love? And so I went and I wrote that and I gave it back to this person who asked that question. And they ended up having a huge spiritual breakthrough from reading how all the different beings in my death experience loved me in a unique way. So I'll just share something here. I was going to give a talk one night at here in where I live in California, and so my poster was up on the door, and in this building, and these 2 men walked past it, and they saw that it was about a near-death experience, and they were walking down the steps as I'm walking up, and they're making fun of near-death experiences, like, oh, that's a bunch of blah, blah, blah. And I stopped and I said, oh, sounds like that's not a very meaningful experience to you. I'm Robin, I'm a near-death experience, and I'm giving the talk. One of them completely changed his tune. He turned to me and immediately started telling me his near-death experience. So, when he's with this other man, trying to save face with this other man, he's making fun of it. But when I validate and give him space, he immediately starts telling me his near-death. So that's part of why I love sharing my story and why I so honor and cherish other near-deathers taking the risk to share their story, is because it gives permission to the thousands and thousands of us who have had a near-death, who have had a near-death-like experience, who have had a mystical experience, and that when we increase the safety, we give a platform for people to come forth with their truth.
Robin, would you be willing to sing for us again?
Yes, I would love to. All right. So is it okay if I kind of focus on you and sing to you?
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Okay. Siam neam eo wo. Siam neam ea yo.
Thank you.
Any particular thing you felt in your body or your being?
May seem kind of weird, but I was focusing on how clear it came through my headphones, and it almost felt like you were here with me singing.
Good. I'm glad. Yeah, and so I was kind of focusing on your diaphragm, your organs.
Thank you.
Getting all the movement in the. I'm also a craniopsychotherapist, so I was focusing on. I love this word motility. So for our joints and our physical body, it's mobility, and for our organs, it's motility.
That's your artwork behind you?
Mm-hmm.
The butterfly flying,
Mm-hmm.
almost like down a tunnel.
Say it again?
I said it's almost like a butterfly flying through a tunnel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is very near-death inspired. And I found a company where I can actually print these on towels, and I'm really happy with how the color comes out. So yeah, so I'm just having a great time putting them on things that are fun for people to use.
Is that usually what you do, is make paintings like that?
Yeah, they're actually color pencil and pastel. And then I take them and I combine them in Photoshop. So this is three drawings combined.
And then it's printed on that
Towel.
material? A towel, okay.
Yep. Yep. So it's just really fun because for people to buy art and frame it is quite expensive and it's not always that useful. So I just thought, how can I make this useful for people and just easy in their life? And, I have my towel that I take when I go swimming. So it's super fun.
Is all of your artwork inspired by your NDE?
A whole bunch of it is. So I have a whole series that is really sharing that story. And then a lot of it, I surrender and I pray and I say, what needs to be shown? And so at the end of the first death experience, when I was traveling back, when I decided to return to life, I met a being and she told me, we have a whole cache of images for you to draw because your job is to remind people the ways that they belong to the Great Heart. So we want you to draw images when you get back to life and you're safe. And we're just going to, basically inundate you with images. So they usually take me like 2 to 3 weeks for each drawing because color pencil is quite slow. And honestly, it's unstoppable. Like I have vision after vision and I just surrender. And then I get really surprised by the images. And that's where I know it's not coming from me or my personality. It's coming from the Great Heart. So I'm looking over at my art studio right now and I finish one and I start the next one. And so it's an incredible honor to have that much divine source coming through me. And that's why I meditate so much, is that I can be in alignment to receive divine instructions.
Robin, is there a question that you wish that someone like me would ask you, but nobody ever does?
Over the years, I've had some good questions. I think I want to share about what's my greatest wishes for this book, since it just came out. And again, I wrote it to honor the people who saved my life and that they died in the war. And so they don't have a voice. And to use my position as an American who, had access to a publisher. And so if this book can save one child's life from violence, then my 16 years of writing, doing all the artwork, is entirely worth it. And if one person who's very confused and is violent to other people, if they read this book and wake up out of that violence, out of that confusion, and they do their trauma resolution work so that they can become a person who contributes love instead of destruction, then all my work is worth it.
Well, your book is titled Loving Bravely, a memoir, miraculous near-death of a girl abducted, shot during war, and sung back to life by an African woman. If people want to find out more about it, do they go to your website or Amazon?
It's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple Books. And so right now when we're doing this podcast interview, the ebook's out. In a couple of days, the physical book will be out. And then I did the audiobook myself last year. And so there's singing in the audiobook. That will be out at the end of October 2024. And I poured my heart and soul into that audiobook. So I think that's really, I pray that really serves people. And I'll just share something with you. as you might know, recording an audiobook is it was weeks and weeks of work. It took over a year. And so I was listening to it once more, like the first part, had headphones on, and I'm just listening for errors. I'm listening for clicks or problems or things. And so I'm kind of in technical mode. But even listening to my own audiobook, for some reason, I don't quite understand, I went into altered brain state. I went into trance while I was listening to my own audiobook. And part of me that was still conscious was wondering, is this happening because Divine Source is imbuing this as a transmission through me? Or am I being affected by my own story? So I don't have the answer to that, but my hope, and several people have told me this, is that it is a direct transmission of the love that I received from the African women to my listeners. And that I tell the near-death experience in such detail. I want people to be able to journey with me on the near-death experiences, so that, just like your question before, can people get an experience without having to be crushed, broken, shot, killed? And so that's why I did the audiobook and poured my heart and soul into it, is that I want people to have that transmission and transformation in their life.
Do you think all creativity comes from the other side in some way?
Mine does.
Is there a way that you can advise people to get in touch with their own creativity?
Mm-hmm. And so my answer might surprise people. Eat super clean. Exercise. Move your body. Because this is the vehicle that needs to receive instruction from Divine Source. If it's full of Cheetos and Diet Pepsi, that is not a clear antenna. And so eating plant-based diet, eating organic, staying home and cooking your own food with good quality oils, avocado oil, coconut oil, high quality olive oil, and unclogging your antenna. Again, movement, dance, join a class, join something where you're in community, meditate with other people. And so I go to ecstatic dance really regularly. And some of my spiritual practices also become partner dance. So I have a really great teacher, and I go to these workshops, and we dance in relationship with one another. So it becomes, how do I feel in my body moving to music that somebody else has put their heart and soul into creating? How does this person's life, physical presence, energetic presence affect my movement? So the beauty of trauma resolution is that you can broaden your experiences. And so, I'm highly intuitive. I am very selective about what environments I put myself in. I don't go to, crazy loud things. I don't go to bars. My system can't tolerate chaotic, misaligned things. And so I do need to be really careful about who I'm around, what I'm around, and what I put in my body. So for myself, I don't eat wheat. I don't eat sugar. So that if you do nothing else, cut your sugar in half. That alone is going to help you be a better receptive form for divine instructions.
Robin, after watching this podcast, people may want to reach out to you and ask you questions. Are you open to that?
Mm-hmm. Yes, so my website is my name, robinlandsong.com, and my assistant will read all the emails, and ones that aren't just logistics, she'll send them to me. And so I also do classes. So I teach on how empaths can have boundaries. I teach on generational healing, trauma healing, embodiment. I sing to people. So I have the classes, I have groups, I have individual sessions if I can keep up with them. And I have singing medicine on my website. I've got the album on my website. Right now the book is all through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all that kind of thing. But yeah, I love connecting with people, and I try to make things a nice scale so the classes are really affordable on up to the individual sessions. And then yeah, in the spring 2025, I'll do an in-person tour. And so yeah, I really love connecting with people and just helping them in their next level of growth. And whether that's a tiny step and just turning over a grain of sand, or whether that's a huge leap. Like again, my favorite is when people work with me and then they cut out all their sugar. Awesome. Because they're going to be able to be more present, alert, and honestly live longer and live in a better way.
Do you teach people to sing like you do?
Yeah, and I'm figuring that a little bit. It's a little tricky through Zoom, but I love doing it in person, especially. Yes, so thanks for reminding me. I will put that group on my schedule again. And I'm not teaching people to be me. I'm teaching people to be their gift.
Robin, before we finish up, can you leave us with one last positive message?
I believe in you. I believe in your aliveness, your goodness, your creativity, and I welcome you to share your spiritually transformative experiences, your mystical experiences. Your creativity is needed in the world. Your gift is needed, and it isn't always received. And so don't stop if you get discouragement at first. Don't stop if the other person is confused and doesn't know how to receive each person's gift. So just keep going until you find somebody receptive, kind, compassionate to what your magical potency is in the world. Keep refining it. Stay with it. The reason my book took 16 years is because it was such a mess in the beginning. It needed all those editors. So don't think your first creative attempt is your final. Refine it for a year. Refine it for 5 years. Just keep going until you feel like, this feels yummy in my body. And then I'm ready to share it with others.
Robin, thank you for your message, and thank you for being my guest again.
My honor, and thanks for what you do in the world and all the uplifting messages that you bring to the world.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching the Jeff Mara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.